Welcome to Bots and Beyond, your weekly dose of all things automation, mixing up end user, vendor, and consultant experience to create your go-to podcast for bot-related insights. I am your host, Wayne Butterfield.
Hi, and welcome back to Bots and Beyond. Another fantastic episode I've got lined up for you this week with partner, friend of the firm, James Loft over at Rainbird, and a little bit more about James and the Rainbird guys shortly. But I thought it was a really great episode for a number of different reasons. Some of the great R&D that the guys at Rainbird have been doing, and some of the problems that they are helping our clients solve. So it's a real pleasure to welcome James.
Thank you very much for having me. We're excited to be here.
Brilliant. And one of the things that we do is, obviously I'm fully aware of who you are, but I really want the audience themselves to get a glimpse of our usual intro, which is, who you are, what you do, and more importantly, James, why you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So who am I? So my name's James Loft. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Rainbird Technologies. What I do, every day is different, I guess, and that's I guess my role. I look after everything at Rainbird post-sale. So I look after the day-to-day operations of the business, but I also work with our delivery teams and our consulting teams to make sure that we not only come up with new things for our clients all the time, but also make sure that we're delivering each time when somebody works with us to get the benefits out of using Rainbird. So the way I do it's kind of tagged into that a little bit, really, is I love problem solving. I love having a different topic to look at every day of the week. And I love to see that inflection point when you're dealing with somebody and you realize that you're starting to move from listening to them to starting to add value to them and their business. I guess a bit of the consultant in me, if you like. I never quite lose that excitement. So I guess that's the why I do it day in, day out, and probably keep doing the same thing, because it never is the same thing from that perspective.
And just for everyone's benefit, I know when I first started working with you guys and talked to clients about the software, I think if you put Rainbird into Google, I know at least when I first started, I'm sure it was like sprinklers. So it's definitely not the sprinklers. But I think it would be really great if you can kind of talk to the audience about, who Rainbird Technologies are and obviously why you're around. And I think you alluded to a little bit of that with the whole problem solving. But let's kind of expand on who Rainbird are and why you guys are around.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Rainbird Technologies, not Rainbird Sprinklers. And I wish I could say we don't get plenty of requests for replacement parts through our help desk. But Rainbird Technologies is a suite of platform technologies that come together in three main parts. The first piece, which is the core piece, is an inference engine. So taking human expertise and codifying it through a business-friendly front end so that somebody can replicate the decisions of their best people time and time again. Now, that can manifest in a whole collection of different ways. So if you have one individual in your team who is better than everybody else, capturing their knowledge in order to be able to scale that, or, for example, if you have an individual that's a subject matter expert that everyone always goes to, and that person becomes a blocker, again, scaling that person's expertise is another use of it. The way that Rainbird in the inference piece works is actually around breaking the linear element of making a decision. So if you think about decision rather than task or process, you start to think about there's lots of nuance and situational elements that come into making a decision. That's where really Rainbird comes into its own. We don't teach Rainbird through coding knowledge into it how to make a decision. We tell Rainbird about a topic. And then Rainbird uses the inference engine underneath it to look at the probabilistic maths of a situation and define an answer from it. So we build corpuses of knowledge on a topic, not how to make the decision. So Rainbird can answer any question that corpus of knowledge has within it. That's our core piece. That's the underlying element of the platform that really is a game changer for how people can codify and get benefit from the expertise that exists in their business already. The other two bits, because I mentioned there was three parts, is a secondary piece, which is our predict element, our machine learning engine, which is basically recognizing that although there are plenty of situations where people can't necessarily benefit from data as a starting point, there's lots of people who do. So having the meeting of those two worlds, so having a data up approach where we can start making predictions over pieces of data in order to determine a decision, but then essentially say, well, once your virtual data scientist has given you a prediction, take your virtual best person and interrogate that answer to make sure you're getting the best of both worlds, the best of the data and the best of the expertise in your business. Bringing those two worlds together by bringing our ML piece in with our wider inference piece is able to widen the net, if you like, of starting points that you can use and benefit from Rainbird from. The third piece, it's kind of like the little brother, but it's just as important, and that's our flow element, which is our connectivity piece. So when you build a connection into Rainbird, you build it once, you build it in through our workflow functionality, and then you can use that connectivity into anything you do. So if you're doing fraud in an organization today and you've built an Experian piece, you can do KYC tomorrow and you still only have to do that one connection one time. So that workflow function, that wrapper, is what allows us to be more agile and more flexible in how we use multiple decisions and compounded decisions in order to be able to generate complete processes as an outcome for our clients.
Great. And you kind of spoke about like decisions, I would say, many times there. And I think what I will want to dig into is, you spoke about inference. You also spoke about data and machine learning. Let's dig into that in a little bit. But first of all, maybe let's just kind of help the audience understand the type of problems that you're helping them solve. And the thing that I kind of want to expose myself is, if you think about decisions, we make, and I think I read somewhere, the average human makes about 2,000 decisions a day. Now, I can guarantee that probably 1,990 of those decisions are subconscious. You don't even realize that you're making them. Whatever percentage of that are in the workplace. But if you want to replicate what a human worker does, you need to be able to replicate and help make many of those decisions. Often people don't even realize that they're making them. So I think that's why this is such an interesting technology, as it looks to help. You said codify knowledge. It's almost codifying subconscious decisions that are being made on a very regular basis. That's kind of the high level. Talk to me a little bit about some of those lower level decisions that or some of the processes where decisions have been made that you've had a lot of success.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing to add to your point there is the impact of biases and noise as well in the everyday of decision making. So we make lots. We don't necessarily fully understand why we make a lot of them, and often, if your football team lost at the weekend, that can have an impact on how you make that decision. So there's lots of factors at play there as to why you would want to use something like Rainbird. The way we think about where people have had value from and where people can get value from Rainbird is that we talk about that in the sense of patterns. So common patterns of value from Rainbird. And those fall under a number of things for us. So they fall under product, price, revenue, customer, risk, and service. And there's lots of things in those. For example, product is a really good starting point, where it's very, very much at the front of most of the businesses we work with. So being able to make a recommendation about a product, be that a service or a regulated environment decision, such as a bank account or a loan or a mortgage or something like that, to be able to take in a myriad of different factors and the expertise and the best outcomes of a whole number of people within a team that do this day in, day out. That's really important. But then when you think about some of the other elements, the other places under that product that Rainbird starts to have a value, you have things like suitability. How do you validate that somebody has the right makeup of a customer that should have that product? Suitability is something that is quite complex. And if you ask different questions, if you get different people on different days, you might miss it. Likewise, vulnerability is also a very important factor in that. We've done a lot of work around vulnerability in financial services to work out what the impact of vulnerability is. And because of the way that Rainbird works is using probabilistic maths, Rainbird actually can say, well, if this person is vulnerable, and it can determine that using a second vulnerability map, then all other answers that person gives, you have to treat differently. Now, that's really hard for a human to do in the right way every time. But Rainbird, being this connected environment of a vulnerability map and a product recommendation map, can factor both those things in at the same time and to the right level. This obviously can be taken elsewhere. So we do a lot of work around risk. So risk detection, risk mitigation, risk around audit as a process. So risk falls into some of the other areas we look at a lot. So we do work in fraud, we do work in underwriting. And really, it's all of these places where there's this natural governance challenge of data versus expertise versus sort of heavily processed ways to avoid some of these other sort of biases and noise. And what Rainbird's really capable of doing is in an amount of time that a human would never be able to get to all of those sources of data, is look at all of the factors and all of the pieces and come together with a very holistic situational view of a user, of a client, and say, this is what I think, this is what I believe the decision should be. Here's my confidence level of that. And here's either why, or here's some other questions I might ask if I can't find them out myself as a system. Here, frontline member of staff, here's some things to ask to firm up that position to make this even more of a sure answer. Some of those other places like revenue, we look at things like sales qualification, we look at speed to market. In service, we've got robo-advisors in the marketplace looking at mortgage, for example, which is the right mortgage. We do claims management, claims triage in insurance, which sits under that service piece. And then we have the other one, which is things like sort of KYC. So this, what is the risk to a decision? KYC being a really obvious starting point in any organization for that. KYC obviously being at the point at which your risk profile of a customer or client starts with you. So that onboarding a KYC piece, right through to assessments about ongoing KYC, repeat KYC, and all of the other factors that fall off of that as you go through. KYC being wrong is very much linked to fraud going wrong if you connect those two worlds together. So being a platform gives us the opportunity to have lots of common patterns, but also to start to demonstrate how the connected world of patterns has a value beyond the initial decision or initial thing you're looking at, and extends out into a more transformational opportunity for the business.
I think there's loads of great insight there that I'd like to dig into. I guess one of the interesting things that I got thinking about while you were talking there is, we're talking about vulnerability and other things, is a lot of the time I've kind of thought about this, augmenting a kind of a human worker or replicating, or assisting in a human conversation. But actually, some of these recommendation engines, they could really be substitutional interactions, like via chatbots and conversational AI, right? So, you could, you would potentially say, oh, we don't want to have, conversations with vulnerable customers. That would always necessarily need to happen with X, Y, and Z. Now, you don't always know, when somebody makes contact with you, whether they are a vulnerable customer. So, you could actually see, the role there of Rainbird in highlighting when it is a vulnerable customer versus one that's not, and whether you choose then to actually pass that on to a person versus keep it within some kind of a technology-based conversation. So loads of interesting things were flying around my head there. Really augmenting even other technologies with more of a kind of a human touch. And I know.
I think what you've highlighted there, Wayne, is actually a really important thing, though. So in the vulnerability piece, vulnerability is not a black or white thing. Sometimes it can be transient, sometimes it can be temporary. And actually declaring someone as vulnerable and taking them down a completely different route is probably not the best thing for them or for you. The FCA has a very black and white view on vulnerability, which is very useful if you can see all of the information on somebody's case. But if you can't, then you are always at exactly that situation you're talking about, that risk there. What Rainbird can and would do in that scenario is say, this person is showing potential markers of someone who might be vulnerable. Now, there's an option there to say if that's a high enough vulnerability that they should speak to somebody who's trained to do so. But otherwise, what it might just say is to the rest of Rainbird is work a bit harder. I'm not so sure that this person meets all of the factors to not fall into that vulnerable category. So just work harder on the other things. Double check that they're understanding the piece. Double check that they're when they can't present a passport, you're finding out the reasons for it, etc. So really, what that can do is, rather than just say it's yes they're vulnerable or no they're not, is to have the beginnings of a degree of influence of vulnerability across the wider piece, the wider maps. And I think that's really where Rainbird comes into its own.
Fantastic. Okay, yeah, excellent extra insight there. Just trying to think of, you mentioned the kind of three components previously, and one of them is the kind of inference engine. The other one is the ML capability, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure it's Evelyn is that the project name or is that the capability name? But for the listener, like, when would you use one or over the other? Like, how would they know when it's best to use a data-led approach versus, I don't know how I would describe it, a knowledge based or an experience-based approach?
Yeah, so we sort of call them colloquially, Evelyn's the project name. One I'm hoping we get rid of before we launch. We call it data up and human down as the two sort of really simplified polarities. In the human down element, there are some really obvious places where you would use that as a starter. So, for example, if you want to automate a part of your business where you don't have a large amount of data, where you don't have a predictive sort of set, if you like, that gives you the insights that you're interested in. That would be a really good starting place to say, well, what, in the expertise I already have in my team, if my best person looked at every single one of these cases and didn't have an SLA to do it every time, could be doing it in milliseconds, then turning that focus on in the first place is really powerful, and that's a good starting point for that. If you have the data, then the data is obviously a very good starting point. Now, we advocate that you don't just start with the data, in the same way that if you've got the option, you don't just start with the inference. We fundamentally believe that the meeting of data and human expertise together in an automated way is the game changer for businesses. So because there's factors in there where you could say, well, the predictive engine shows me that I should be trying to sell insurance to this 80-year-old man, but actually the codified human is saying, well, actually that 85-year-old man's not very well represented in that data set. So again, when I was talking about this vulnerability thing, just drop your understanding of the predictions, the impact of your predictions from a probabilistic perspective, and again, just work a bit harder and say, well, what else is there? What would a human, if they were going to look at this case, do? So we very much advocate the meeting of those two worlds together to work harder. Rainbird is, in the inference sense, is a huge amplifier of the data. As well, in the sense of it can give sustained value. So sometimes when people are starting with data, they see an initial peak of value because the data suddenly tells them something they didn't know before. But then there's this dip where you have to refine algorithms, work harder with your data sets to improve and find your next peak, if you like, of value. Rainbird inference, because you have to codify people, is a little bit slower, but catches up very, very quickly in its percentage of adding value. And we've listened to a lot of our clients, and one of the main reasons we have these two pieces now is we want to be able to reach and maintain value for our clients a lot quicker. The point with using both here is not only will Rainbird work to look at what a human would do with the information once a data source, once a predictive element has been produced, but Rainbird also can close the loop on that and start working back all the way back round to the algorithm to start refining it, to improve it automatically, to get more better predictions out in the future. Again, all wrapped up in that flow piece, which is making all of this possible as a single piece without continual data scientists dipping in and getting the most out of it. So simplified version of that. If you haven't got any data, you can already start automating with your people. If you have got data, you can get more out of it by doing it in this way. But generally, doing both together is going to give you the best, and we believe longest value and quickest, but also longest value out of the thing you're trying to automate.
Right, and then just thinking about it just from an audience perspective. So, we would say that your tool is like no code, low code. It's similar to RPA in the sense that operational users, decision makers, SMEs, etc. This is kind of a toolkit for them versus traditional IT or data scientists. How would you kind of best describe where this type of tool can sit within an organization?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, because where it can sit, whereas where you might want it to sit, are obviously two very different things. So this is a very powerful tool for data scientists. It's a very powerful tool for RPA engineers, developers to be able to connect in to existing services that they've already produced. It is built to be able to not need any of that. So it is low code in the sense, low code, no code in the sense that a business person can come in and can codify their expertise. Even the ML predictive element can be used without a data scientist. So in the sense of that, we are trying to, and I hate this phrase, but it does sum it up well, we are trying to democratize the availability of both of those fundamental parts of automation. Now, you may have an existing environment, you may have an existing COE, and Rainbird would slot very well into that, because Rainbird's been built in a way where it supports a developer community as well as a business community. So if you have a developer community that wants to use code, you can build in Rainbird in code, and it will build in the graphical interface simultaneously for a business person to be able to interrogate and understand. Likewise, it happens the other way as well. So the connectivity of those two sets of people, if you like, means that you can start with either benefit from both, or use whichever you don't have the other one of, and still get the value out of using Rainbird. And our flow bit, I know I said it's the little brother, but it's drag and drop. So if you want to make connectivity, if you want to create workflows, that is drag and drop. That is absolutely democratized in every sense for somebody to be able to get the connected value out of using it.
Excellent. Okay, no, that's useful. I just thought then it'd be good for the audience to kind of understand where this type of tool can fit. And I guess one of the things that I'm getting from this is the tool could do so much. That we're probably not aware of the number of decisions that we're making, the complexity of some of those, and I guess one of the things that I know you guys are really interested in at the moment is this kind of you're building out a community. Now the community is kind of one of its purposes, obviously knowledge sharing, and I think it'd be really good just to hear a little bit more about the role of the Rainbird community, what you're hoping to get out of it, actually what others get out of it, and maybe how the audience could get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Rainbird community, so there's two ways that we help people understand how to get the most out of Rainbird. The first being on a contractual route where we use a service design-led approach, and we really look at problems. That's not scalable for everybody who wants to just see what the benefit to them could be. So community is a space where we're opening up Rainbird to anybody that wants to come and use it for free. So if you come and become a member of our community, you also get a community Rainbird platform account, and you can absolutely benefit from playing with it. You get, actually in the community environment, you get the latest things first. So we use that as the test bed for our own new features, and there's lots of those coming over the coming months. So Community for us is about a place where we can interact with all of those people. So, when you ask me the question, where does it sit? Well, it's kind of a mildly vague answer because it could sit in the business, it could sit with the developers, it could sit with the data scientists. We want to bring all of those people together into a community and build in public. And building public is a very important thing for us because we're very good at building Rainbird models. But it tends to be that the best ones we do are for clients who can't really show to the outer world what they're doing and why they're doing it for reasons of either security, risk, whatever that might be. So this is an environment where we can lay bare our capabilities, show people and allow people to build alongside us and really start to see the benefits of Rainbird. Now, this is open to anybody. So, community.rainbird.ai, go and sign up. If anyone wants to do it, completely free account. If you want to build a small business off the back of that, there's some daily limitations to how much you use. But if you find that you can add a value to someone else's life doing it, please go ahead. But be part of the community. Tell us about it because that's where we're going to learn faster. You started that question with the age-old problem of being a platform. Being a platform means we can pretty much do anything. It's like the good old Excel. I've got the squares, you bring the numbers. And that is great because that's really useful because that means there's a breadth of things you can do with it, but also means that if you started today, you would never be able to capture all of the possible things you could do with it on your own. You'd be going for a very long time. So community is about allowing people to come and show how they would get value from it, learn around Rainbird, find new use cases, find new features that we need to put into the platform and really just help the wider environment learn about and benefit from Rainbird quicker on that smaller scale.
Excellent. And I think as well as community, I don't know whether anybody else has seen it, but there's a bit of a competition ongoing at the moment that I've seen on LinkedIn. And again, like pretty far out user case, I would have thought. COVID safe holidays. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So as part of using community, we wanted to show our credentials, if you like, with the building in public element. So we created a competition around taking the latest government advice and codifying it into Rainbird to help what could be situationally complex information very, very simple. We did this with our COVID tool last year in clinical environments. We helped people very, very quickly interpret lots of regularly changing information to determine something. Now it's a topic that's really going to be at the center of people's attention now, and especially is where can I go? How likely is it to change? What is the impact? And actually, based on all of the environments, my circumstances, the global circumstances, variations in that, in more than one governmental position, moving from one country to another, how do we very, very quickly make it easy for somebody to choose where to go on holiday based on all of those factors? We're looking for people to come and add their thoughts. So we'll build a base map and then we want people to really come in and go, well, have you thought about this? What about this? Let's try this. So the map and how to build what we've done is available. And at the end of the day, we're looking for some really great ideas. We're looking for people to have actual benefit from this. And if you bring the best ideas and the best benefit, then there's an Oculus up for grabs there as well, which I enjoy the irony of because having an Oculus, I know that I don't need to go on holiday to see some great places around the world. So the tool in that sense would be a little bit redundant because you can go anywhere you want in 3D.
Fantastic. Really interesting user case. And obviously it's one to try and, I guess, build interest in the tool and obviously solve a real life problem that many people have at the moment, especially with all the changing rules and this traffic light system in play. Right, we have well and truly gone over time, but it's been such a fascinating discussion this week. I'm sure the audience will agree, and I think we've really just scratched the surface. But for anyone interested in learning more about Rainbird Technologies, James will obviously be tagged in the show notes. Rainbird will be tagged in the promo posts. And I'm sure James won't mind you reaching out to him also. And of course, there is the Rainbird community. And we'll put some instructions on how you can sign up for the Rainbird community as part of the release notes. So hopefully this has been really useful for everybody else. It's been fascinating for me to deep dive into Rainbird with James. James, hopefully it's been great for you.
Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you very much for having me.
Excellent, my absolute pleasure, and thank you all for listening. And we'll speak to you soon. Thank you.